जब भी स्टॉक ट्रेडिंग की बात आती है तो हम बहुत सारे फाइनेंशियल रेशियोज और पैरामीटर्स को जज करते हैं, उनको स्टडी करते हैं जस्ट टू फिगर आउट कि विच इज दैट वन स्टॉक विच इज फंडामेंटली साउंड। उनमें से एक पैरामीटर है प्रमोटर्स होल्डिंग और प्रमोटर्स होल्डिंग के अंदर एक और पैरामीटर है नोन एज प्लेजिंग ऑफ शेयर्स। तो आज इस वीडियो में हम इन सबको समझेंगे डिटेल्स में।
Hello and namaste. My name is Anamika Rana and I am a chartered accountant.
And in today's video, we will talk about promoters holding and pledging of shares. So let's begin first of all with understanding who is a promoter. तो अगर हम डेफिनेशन देखें विकिपीडिया में तो अ प्रमोटर इज बेसिकली अ फर्म और अ पर्सन हु डज द प्रिलिमिनरी वर्क इन रिलेशन टू द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ अ कंपनी। तो यानी कि जब एक कंपनी स्टार्ट हो रही होती है, फॉर्म हो रही होती है, तो उस टाइम पे जो भी पर्सन है, जो भी फर्म उसके इनिशियल कामों को देखता है, दैट इज अ प्रमोटर, इंक्लूडिंग द वर्क लाइक प्रमोशन, इनकॉर्पोरेशन, फ्लोटेशन ऑफ द कंपनी, सॉलिसिटिंग वर्क यूजुअली व्हेन इट इज बीइंग फॉर्म्ड। गॉट इट? सो ओवरऑल कौन होता है प्रमोटर? जो कि अर्ली लेवल पे जब कंपनी फॉर्म हो रही होती है उनके सारे कामों को देखता है और साथ ही साथ ये भी इंश्योर करता है कि लोग उसमें पैसों को इन्वेस्ट करें। अब हम ये समझते हैं व्हाट इज प्रमोटर्स होल्डिंग। सो प्रमोटर्स तो हमें समझ में आ गया कौन होता है। अब प्रमोटर होल्डिंग, द वर्ड इट सेज कि प्रमोटर कितना होल्डिंग परसेंटेज होल्ड कर रहा है कंपनी के अंदर। नाउ दिस परसेंटेज ऑफ कोर्स विल वेरी फ्रॉम कंपनी टू कंपनी डिपेंडिंग ऑन हु द प्रमोटर्स आर एंड हाउ मेनी प्रमोटर्स द पर्टिकुलर कंपनी हैज, राइट? तो प्रमोटर्स होल्डिंग और कुछ नहीं बट यही होता है कि एक परसेंटेज होता है कि उस कंपनी के जितने भी प्रमोटर्स हैं वो उस कंपनी में कितना परसेंटेज स्टेक या ओनरशिप को होल्ड करके रखे हुए हैं। और अगर आपको ये प्रमोटर्स होल्डिंग का परसेंटेज चेक करना है देन यू कैन गो टू एनी वेबसाइट लाइक एनएसई वेबसाइट, बीएसई वेबसाइट। सपोज आपको एबीसी कंपनी का प्रमोटर्स होल्डिंग चेक करना है, जस्ट टाइप इन द नेम ऑफ दैट कंपनी, क्लिक ऑन द सर्च बटन एंड उसके अंदर देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड शेयर होल्डिंग पैटर्न, जो कि ये बताता है कि उस कंपनी का जितना भी शेयर होल्डिंग है वो कितने कितने प्रोपोर्शन में स्प्लिट है अमंग्स प्रमोटर्स, DIIs, FIIs, which is nothing called domestic and foreign institutional investors, and the retail investors like you and me. Now let's take a very simple layman example. Suppose you are the promoter of a particular company ABC and you are holding 40% of the entire ownership or stake in that company, and suppose you feel that yes, the company has the potential to perform in the future, to grow its verticals, to expand its business lines, even grow in different geographic locations, then of course you will want to increase your percentage of stake in that company. So basically if we see that promoters holding is increasing in a company, it's a good sign. But what really happens if there is a decrease in that company? What does it signify? It just basically gives out the message that जो promoters है उस company में ही उनको एक faith, एक trust नहीं है कि वो लॉन्ग टर्म में परफॉर्म कर पाएगी कि नहीं कर पाएगी, एंड क्या वो एक साउंड स्ट्रेटेजी के थ्रू मार्केट कंपटीशन को बीट कर पाएगी या नहीं कर पाएगी। बट नाउ द क्वेश्चन कम दैट डज अ लो प्रमोटर होल्डिंग इज ऑलवेज अ नेगेटिव साइन? वेल द सिंपल आंसर इज नो। आई टेल यू व्हाई। बिकॉज देयर आर सिचुएशंस जहां पे प्रमोटर्स होल्डिंग कम होता है लेकिन वो कंसिस्टेंटली इंक्रीज हो रहा होता है। सो फॉर एग्जांपल देयर इज अ कंपनी ABC, अगेन ABC लिमिटेड, एंड यू सी द प्रमोटर्स होल्डिंग सपोज इन 2018 was 20%, and then you see with every passing year the promoters holding is low, however it is increasing. यानी कि अगर वो 20% था तो वो 25% हो रहा है, 28% हो रहा है, which is still not a lot but at least it is increasing. Then second example is that there is a company ABC Limited again which has a low promoter holding, but if the proportion of DII and FII holding is high, then also it's a good sign. And the fun part is that it has been seen in history also that there have been lot of stocks which happen to be multi-bagger amongst these category of companies which had an initial low promoters holding. For example, M&M, Axis Bank, IndusInd Bank, and in fact even companies like HDFC and L&T as well. In fact, L&T also had 0% promoters holding. I think it still does today. I'm not sure of that exactly, but these are few of the examples of the companies which even despite having a low promoters holding still happen to become multi-baggers. So now let's talk about pledging. We learned about promoters, we learned about promoters holdings. Now let's understand what is pledging. Now this is one aspect which usually we tend to neglect, or usually it is not shown in a highlighted version in many websites I have seen. So what is pledging? Let's take a very basic example. Pledge मतलब होता है गिरवी रखना, right? So usually हम गिरवी कब रखते हैं? जब हमें पैसों की requirement होती है. But the same logic applies to a company as well. Suppose as a promoter you hold 60% stake in the company, but you want some money, some finances to run the company's operations, and you are not able to raise money from the outside market for whatever reason. So in that case you as a last resort or as a choice by the promoters themselves, by the management themselves, you decide that I will stake 30% of my promoters holding, and in return for that, the lender or the bank or the third party will give me a loan amount of XYZ rupees, which will be used to run the company's financial operations. But what is the bad part about it is that, of course, once the company takes up a loan in the form of a liability, it becomes under a pressure to make sure it is able to repay back the loan and the interest. So net on net, the company is under a financial pressure. In fact, in a situation where the promoter is not able to pay the interest or the loan for whatever reason, they will actually have to sell that percentage of stake which they had kept for pledging, and this results in a reduction of the percentage of ownership of the promoters in that particular company as well. Now let's talk about one of the most important aspects, that is how does pledging impact the stock valuation, right? So the first impact is, of course, the more number of shares are pledged, the more volatile the price of that stock becomes. So for example, as a promoter, suppose you pledged stake in the company in return for a loan of 1000 rupees. Now the current market price, which is the CMP, is 10 rupees. So basically, you pledged 100 shares of your company. Okay, now this as a news, when it comes in the papers next day, of course, as an investor, you don't take it in a very positive manner, and this further leads to a selling in the market of that particular share, which further on leads to a reduction in the market price. And once the current market price, suppose it falls from 10 to 5, as the promoter, to retain 1000 rupees of loan, you will have to further pledge 100 shares more. Got it? Because in total you have to now pledge 200 shares, out of which 100 have already been pledged and 100 will now on further be pledged. Now again, when this particular news comes out next day in the market, again there is selling. So this is like a chain reaction, which is more like a trap from which it is not easy to really come out as a management. Now, impact number 2 is, of course, it leads to a lower profits. Now, why lower profits? Because when you pledge your stocks, you get a loan on which you have to pay interest as well, which is an expense. So when the expense increases, the profits go down. And when the profits go down, of course, it's not a positive side on the company's profit and loss account, which we see as an investor. And the third impact is possible loss of ownership of the company. Now, if you relate it to the first example, that is, how it becomes a trap with every layer or every phase of pledging, what is seen is that suppose the management or the promoters are not able to repay back the loan or the interest for whatever reason, you will have to actually sell off that particular stake which you have pledged in the open market, and that will lead to a reduction in the control or the ownership of the company. So basically these are 3 impacts. First is the price of the stock becomes very volatile. Second is it causes a lower profits of the company, and third is there is a loss of ownership of the company. So now let's conclude on whether promoters holding is a good thing or not a good thing, and what are the things to be seen. So we discussed about who is a promoter, what is promoters holding, then we discussed about pledging of shares. We also discussed about how pledging impacts the stock valuation, and now we will close this discussion by hence concluding that, of course, as a standalone basis, you cannot judge the company's health just on the basis of its promoters holding. Now, for example, you go for a company which you find very lucrative, which has a lower promoter holding. Ideally, in that case, what you should see is that whether the company is cash positive or negative, which you can see in the company's cash flow statements. Also, what you should see is that how much the company is in debt in comparison to its earnings, which can be seen from the debt equity ratio as well. And the last one part you should always see is the trend of promoters holding. So for example, whether the trend is increasing or it is decreasing, and then you can look at the other parameters as well and then come to a conclusion. That's all for this video from my end. If you feel this video was helpful and very simple, straight to the point, then do hit the like button. Tell me in the comments if there are any other parameters which you want me to explain to you in details when it comes to fundamental analysis. So that's it. I will see you soon again. Till then, take care. Namaste. Bye-bye.